There you go. You can chat. Other than that, if somebody wanna share any dad joke, sure, go for it. But I have a puzzle. Yeah, I have a riddle today. When I was talking to my team, this was the riddle. So the riddle, I gave it to them. What is that thing which you can hold in your right hand but not in your left hand? Or maybe not thing. Let's say what you can hold in your right hand but not in your left hand. If you know the answer,
I
then
don't know
that's
the
just
answer, but I can try. Your left hand.
uh, no. The question was, what is?
Oh, that was my answer. You can hold your left hand with your right hand, but you can't hold your left hand with your left hand.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The question was
Greg is saying
other way.
your palm.
Well, yeah, I have to be specific. Which palm, right palm or left palm? But yeah, that question was that answer was definitely right on track, but it's just missed the prefix, right palm or left palm.
Oh.
If the
So,
answer is
Greg, Avinash is getting too specific here.
all right. So it's 7:02. We do have 6 participants in here. Welcome everybody. We will be getting started pretty soon. We are waiting for folks to join our webinar. We will wait until 7:05, and as soon as clock says 7:05, we will get started. Thank you for your patience. Until then, if you have anything, any riddle for us, just chat and talk to us. Will try to use our brain. Like it's almost like what 7 p.m. It's shutting down, so I don't mind waking it up. Ah, look at that. He's coming from future. That's nice. He's already enjoying Friday. Wow. Meenakshi, I like your photo. Who is that?
Thank you. Is it a photo or is it just wings? Let me see. What is it? Is it a
Well,
photo?
I thought it's a cat.
No.
No.
The whiskers? No. They're just wings
Oh.
in the cloud.
Okay. Now I see that. Oh, because I have seen that photo. Now I
Right,
can
right.
connect.
It's from
Yeah.
the winter holidays, Christmas time. Yep. And I haven't changed it.
Yeah. I remember when we were working towards what 820 DMVA.
Right, right. I usually put up the LAN background, but the other day I was someplace and they were like, "What is this LAN thing?" I'm like, "Oops, let me change it."
We have 1 minute, so we can do a quick riddle. It is shorter than the rest, but when you're happy, you raise it up like it's the best. What is it? It's shorter than the rest, but when you're happy, you raise it up like it's the best. What is
Your
it?
voice.
Your thumb.
Yes, Sri, you got it. Man, that was quick. But we are on time. It's 7:05.
All right. Cool. Okay. So we have people in here. Thank you everybody one more time, and we have Sri today to present his topic, and I will let him introduce the topic, and I will not take the honors away from him. However, I will have the honors to introduce him. Sri has almost 17 years of transformational advisory and delivery experience, which is spanning with business strategy as well as operations across industries in North America, Europe, and Asia. He has also worked with senior leadership and multiple cross-functional teams, business units, including startups to large organization in their agile transformation. Now, along with that, he has experience with products, digital engineering, sales, marketing. That means whatever you can imagine, he has worked from top to bottom in an organization, from in all the work streams per se, if you want to say in that way. He is also active member of Agile community. Right now, currently, he volunteers as a director of the Toronto Agile community to organize events. And he's so passionate about promoting networking, learning, and thought leadership. With that said, welcome, Sri, and from here, up to you, sir.
Thank you, Nash. Thank you to every single organizer of the Luden Agile Network. Really honored to be invited to share my learnings and my experiences from my last organization, which is the talk. And thank you to all the attendees. I know it's late evening on a Thursday, or for some folks Friday afternoon, so really appreciate you being here. So as Nash said, I'm going to share about like some of my experience from the most recent organization that I led the business agility transformation as a VP. So this talk is going to be roughly about like 40 minutes. So I'm going to try to be slide light, which is, you know, a challenge for a consultant. So challenge accepted, and leave the remaining time for engaging in a lively dialogue Q&A at the end. So definitely hold your thoughts and questions, and, you know, I'll kind of cover through the key messages that I wanted to share today, and perhaps look forward to a rich discussion. So with that said, the topic that I wanted to share with you today is about like reinventing your organization to become more customer driven and nimble. So without further ado, let me kind of advance through the slides. I don't think I need to do any more introduction. I'm thankful to Nash and the Luden Agile Network organizers. They really sold me good. Hopefully I can live up to the expectation. The only thing that's relevant for the topic is the one that I said. So this talk is about my transformation journey experience that I supported Thomson Reuters, a large global organization headquartered out of Toronto, but predominant in the US, where most of the participants are here. So this talk is about the journey that I helped both as like, you know, Deloitte and then as like Thomson Reuters in the span of like 2018 through 2020. So that's about me in a nutshell. So before we get started, wanted to prime or anchor the rest of the conversation in terms of what it means to be, or like, you know, what I mean by reinventing the organization to be more customer driven and nimble. The backdrop for this organization that I was referring to, they're a large global organization with multiple business products that they offer to their customers, and, you know, to name a few, they have like tax products that were being offered and sold to like the tax accounting professionals. They had legal products that typically they sell to law firms, as well as like you know, the courts and other organizations, legal institutions, and they had like products that cater to large global corporations, which are on the whole like tax and legal, but like from a corporation standpoint. And then, you know, Thomson Reuters, if you're familiar with like Reuters Media or Reuters News, that's like another line of business. And then global print was another area of business, which was more traditional like print materials in the form of like tax publications and legal publications. Now, the reason why I shared the different lines of businesses is for each of the business, the segmentation and what it means to be customer centric is very different. But to make it simpler for this discussion, at a high level, anchor it around like the typical customer journey that a B2B customer would actually you know, engage in a business with a company like Thomson Reuters or any other B2B or I guess organization selling products and or services to their customers. So again, you can this is what we had done, like shop, evaluate, buy, and renew, set up, use, support, refer. You can substitute this with other customer journeys that you have perhaps experienced personally. But the intent and the focus was across these 5 lines of businesses, the key concept was more about like, what are the different pain points that we heard from the customers across the journey in the different lines of businesses. And some of these are on slide here. In addition to the customer, what were the internal pain points or opportunities that were there in terms of becoming more customer centric? Again, all for the purpose of how do we improve our customer interaction and experience? How can we sell more? How do we cross-sell different products? How do we reduce our cost of operations? How do we get more alignment between businesses? Things that most of you would have, I'm presuming that would have encountered in your current organization or other organizations that you might have been full-time or like supported as a consultant as a vendor. So from a customer standpoint, anchoring around the customer, the key pain points that existed or we were focusing on was the inconsistent end-to-end customer journey experience, whether it was between different products or even within a product. There were different incoherent experiences as you move from one product to another. So that was something that the customers were felt like, compared to the competition, Thomson Reuters had a better opportunity to refine and redefine their stance in terms of providing a more seamless experience moving in between, like within a product, but then also moving from one product to another. So the coherent and consistent experience as you move through the journey and across products as well. The second, the other ones might be more common, but like, just as a nature of the organization, Thomson Reuters is huge. It's a big corporation in terms of like the size of the book of business and others, but a lot of the growth were more inorganic than organic through acquisitions and mergers. So some of the pain points that you see on the slide here from a customer's perspective is through like, integration, the stability resulting as a result of, the integration of multiple products that were acquired through acquisitions and integrations. Oh, I see a question pop up. Yes, Greg, the slides, I'm happy to share that with the organizers to share this after. And then because of the integration and acquisition of like multiple organizations and the products that come with it, the back office support and customer support were definitely not like seamless, like where it was consistent, like because the people that supported came in from the acquired organizations or merged organizations. So there was definitely a difference in experience from a customer standpoint in terms of whether they call customer support for product A versus product B. And the last thing, which was a good problem to have, but it definitely not an operational efficiency perspective, which is really kind of is the point around high cost of operations. Because they acquired and merged with many companies, they had so many products, and then some products were redundant with what other products offered with maybe slight similar or slight overlaps. So the reason this context is important is the whole transformation journey was anchored around like, how do we solve for the pain points and the opportunities that we had, both from a customer and an internal standpoint. So with that, I'll kind of move to this one, which kind of shapes like, okay, what were some key drivers, goals, and desired outcomes as a result of this journey? Now, I'm here to talk in the context like how did like agility or business agility enable this transformation? So not everything was agile, just to be clear. There was a lot of other things. I'll just touch upon it in subsequent slides. But really, to provide that type of a transformative change to address some of the customer and internal pain points, there were like 5 goals that we had anchored on. First one was reimagining experience, which is again not to be redundant and repeat myself, was the things that I said, like how do you provide like consistent and coherent experience end to end at the same time when you move from product to product. Enabling the growth, like how do we break silos, traditional silos? How do we actually complement and support cross-sell and upsell of different products across the different business segments? And third one, like how do we actually engage more with the customer from a digital standpoint? Of course, omni-channel experience was key, but from a cost of operations standpoint, how do we get more digital sales, digital renewal experience for the customer and digital service for the customers that provides a more seamless experience, but also helps with cost of operations, reduce cost of operations. The fourth point ties to that. And the last one was critical, is to jump forward, like, to look forward for what is the future of work looks like, and like what does the future of workforce look like. One thing was very obvious was we needed like to attract and grow for workforce for the future, for not just skills that the organization had today, but organizations that skills that the organization needed in the future. So it's like, how do we design for the future at the same time, like thinking about upskilling? It's not just all through internal, like external hires, but how do we upskill our existing talent to make sure that we are ready for the future? So those were all like overarching goals for this transformation change journey. And some of the desired outcomes might have been obvious when I talked about it. Customer being at the center. The first one was like, how do we improve our customer NPS scores across all the different products and all the different business segments that the organization had? And others, I'm not going to drain each one of them. Like, sales, commercial growth, top line and bottom line performance was a key desired outcome in terms of like aggressive, ambitious goals that we had from over a 2 to 3 year time frame. And some of the other things that are more familiar as it relates to agility in the product and technology organization. So one of the things that you might have seen in the session description is, Agile has been pervasive in technology and product. And, this is a use case of how agility was used to like enable the business to go beyond agility in the product and technology to end-to-end sales, marketing, product proposition, customer success, your like finance and HR, funding, all the good things that happen, that's needed to enable like end-to-end agility. How does that like actually happen, or like how we actually went about doing that in all for the purpose of driving these goals or achieving these goals and achieving these desired outcomes. So that's kind of like the framing in terms of like what was behind the why behind the transformation change journey. So with that, like one of the key things that we wanted to do was align on like few key principles that's going to guide our transformation change journey. The overall vision was very simple, as like, to transition to a simpler, more integrated, innovative, and agile company. It's easier said than done, but key things that aimed were like, all our coaching and all our focus actions and behaviors of not just the change agents, but also the people like that are going through this change. One of the key principles is like be customer focused, give people the empowerment opportunity to make decisions that are closer to the customer, whether it is an example of making pricing decisions or like resolving an issue. Like how do we actually push the decision making down and empower the frontline teams to make more decisions that are more customer centric and that are more geared towards improving the customer experience and interaction in general. The second one is like anchor on impact. This was, we lived and breathed as a COE, we lived and breathed through this over the past, the 2 or 3 years that we existed. The key thing is that it's not agile for the sake of agile. It was all anchored around like whether it is commercial outcomes or NPS or like, the speed to market and others. It was focused on outcomes and it was valued on impact. If something didn't contribute directly to like the outcomes, it was always like deprioritized or like prioritized down the line rather than more output and delivery focused things. So again, agile was not the key, but agility to drive outcomes, that was a goal. And so as I kind of touched through, like you'll see, like we were not very regimented about like frameworks as an example. So I'll share some of those as to why, like, how to make this principle real. And last one is around like agility, not just for initiatives. And this is something that we were very passionate about. This is something that I strongly believe in. You can get like the benefit of agility on like, on projects and programs, whether it is product IT, technology, or outside, like in the business side. It's great, but then that's a quick burst of showing impact. I do not debate that, but the longer term sustainability and outcome is going to be enabling agility in your BAU type work, or like, whether BAU work in the technology or like in any parts of the organization. How do you infuse and enable agility in the business as usual work? And I'll kind of touch upon like some of the examples down the line. So these were 3 guiding principles as we formed our COE. And what's also the next one, which kind of is a transition into the COE. One first thing that might be a shock for a lot of people, even internally as we built the COE, this was a big change exercise. We were very clear, and we declared even from the time when we started the COE that this was a transient group, as in we would be there for an X period of time to help support this organization through the change. So our primary goal was to build, capability and sustainability build within the business, not necessarily COE stay forever. So that was one like operating like COE principle that we were true to. The second one was, while we need coaches, that's not the only thing we need. So what we did is the COE of 31 people that we had was complement of not just Agile coaches, like when I say not to diminish Agile coaches, but just to give the type of muscle and skill that we needed to transform the organization. So it was more center of excellence. Thank you. Were like business transformation consultants, as in like someone that doesn't necessarily just know Agile, but we also had people like change managers. We had people from parts of the business, like people who were in the customer success organization, or people who were in the sales organization that have adopted agility in the past, like themselves. So that was key aspect, is not just like Agile coaches who are primarily from a process perspective, but people who have been in the business, led that, like change managers, finance folks who could help us like transform like the funding model. So basically, the 30 people were a combination, and sorry, not to forget like the leadership coaches, like professional leadership coaches who have the agility and Agile acumen to make that more real, of like what is, like get the leadership coaching, like professional leadership coaching with like agility that can make these behaviors real that we needed for transforming. So question from Greg, do you have a hybrid mix of traditional and Agile, or no Agile at all? So this is mostly product and technology have been adopting Agile for 15 years. So a lot of this was traditional in the rest of the org, but then transitioning them into Agile, if that answers your question. So that's the desire or the ambition for the change journey. And the last one is around the consulting support for capability build. As I said earlier, I started this journey, like when I was supporting this journey in 2018 and good part of 2019, I was with Deloitte, and like we had McKinsey there. So definitely it was not all just purely internal, but then we needed, like, again, going back to the capability and sustainability building, it was important that we build the capability of the COE and augment the capacity from like bringing in vendors, consultants, to bring in like their expertise for from how they would have helped like other organizations through this change journey as well, to help build our internal capability. But the key difference is they didn't lead; they supported and help our capability, the COE's capability, and we're providing their experience from helping other organizations in enabling and scaling agility. So that was 3 things, just from a COE or Center of Excellence perspective. The 3 things that we were true from the day one. And I'll share, like, when I said the transient group, like how the journey went, and like what was kind of like the journey, and like how we transitioned or ended disbanded the COE at the end of 2020. So which is the next one. So just in a quick nutshell, so the change journey, as I said, like it started from mid-2018 and then till like end of 2020. Now, it was not a big bang approach like, ING or other organizations. This was started out as a more organic approach where, because of the customer pain points and the internal pain points and the change drivers and the goals, desired goals and outcomes, agility was identified as one of the key enablers towards this transformation journey. But given that the organization was fluent and more comfortable in adopting in the product and technology space, but not so much in the rest of the organization, it started as more as an organic approach where across the different lines of business that I shared earlier, it was through like self-selection of the leaders to say like, put their hands up to say like whether they're comfortable and wanted to adopt like, pilot some projects in terms of few projects or like BAU type of work that they were interested in. So this was not a mandate from the top of the house, but this was more through self-selection of the leaders within the different business units or business segments to identify like projects and or like business as usual type of work, whether it is like your customer success org or the sales function to adopt like, agility to see how this actually helped them improve like their, commercial outcomes or like, their speed to market and customer outcomes and the people outcomes, not to forget that. So we started the business agility COE with a slim team of like 3 to 4 people, again, supported by consultants, helped through these pilots. And this kind of like led into the early 2019 timeframe, where the pilots that we did, like in the construct of like initiatives or business as usual, led to overwhelming commercial outcomes and customer outcomes, where the results were like, increase in pipeline or increase in sales and increase in NPS and employee satisfaction scores. So early 2019 was an inflection point, another inflection point where one of the segment where this pilots were done, the leader actually raised their hand and said like, we want to go all in, transform their entire business unit or business segment end to end, like not just like product technology, but like all the way in all the end to end customer journey that I shared earlier and all the functions, not just individual silos, but how can they come together and actually get more drive more outcomes, like whether it is commercial or customer or employee outcomes. So that was a big win in 2019. Was this leader that wanted to champion and say like, I want to go all in and transform my entire business end to end. So this is where that resulted in the COE building rapidly in terms of increasing the size of the COE to support that scale. And I'm going to, like, rather than going through just maybe fast forward a little bit in the interest of time. At the end of 2019, we had transformed in that business unit. There were like, 2 or 3 sub-segmentation, like in terms of customer segmentation. We had like large business focused to the catering to the large business, a sub-segment catering to the small medium business, and a sub-segment catering to emerging market. And as I said at the onset, depending on the customer segments, like the expectation of the clients is different. How you actually go and sell, like go to market is different. How you actually support the customer is different. So this was a huge test to our ability for how do we actually design cross-functional, end-to-end cross-functional teams or team of teams that actually cater to different customer experience expectations from an end-to-end journey, depending on the customer sub-segmentation. And how do we actually organize our teams to, like, in terms of go-to-market, how do we actually service our customers differently? So that was all of 2019 to actually help support this this one business unit like transform successfully. Now, fast forward to end of 2019, where truth be told, we didn't get to finish all of the segment, but we got to 75% of the segment. Like 2 of the 3 subsegments were all like operating in the cross-functional team of teams model, and delivering more than 100% of their sales quota and like improving NPS scores, driving all the good things. So I'll come to the outcome success achieved in a couple of slides from now. But the change story, like all these like changes, incremental changes, were like from a change management standpoint, we made sure that as a COE, we actually had these leaders go and tell this story and publicize the story all across the organization. So it doesn't come as a bunch of 31 or 30 COE members tooting their horns and saying how agile and agility can be great, but rather have the leaders talk about like how this has actually helped transform their business. So again, from a leadership coaching and change management perspective, we actually build on the momentum and build on the wins and have them actually communicate the journey and communicate the success in the journey, so that other leaders in the other business units would want to get more excited and want to consider doing this like all in their things, which kind of goes into that, the late 2019, where, I have my cursor up to say like got buy-in for a full scale up. So that was kind of an inflection point where in the end of 2019, beginning of 2020 was the desire to scale up like across end-to-end, across all business segment, and then with a repeatable model that we could take to the rest of the organization. So I'm going to advance the slide just to get into the specifics of types of things. Okay, what were our actions? Karen, I'm getting to that in this slide. One of the things was just as I talked about, a concept of zero-based design. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get into the details of what zero-based design means, but just to say, this is almost going back to my point earlier about not just thinking about where you are today and the incremental changes, but if you were to relook at what does your workforce need to be in terms of talent, what skills do they need, and what other levers you need to pull. It's almost basically looking at from an org design perspective, what is designing for the future, and looking at where you are, what are the gaps, and what is the plan, what do we need from an upskilling or hiring perspective, or engaging other vendors to bring in that type of capability and to deliver that type of a customer experience. So that was one of the aspects in terms of that. Now the question, the key aspect was around the enterprise OKR framework. So I think, Karen, to your question about how do we break down silos. Now this OKR thing is simple, it's one bullet point here, but the pain that we had to go through and the time that it took to actually get enterprise OKR adoption. When I say enterprise, all the way from C-level folks, their leadership team actually having their OKRs, and vertically as well as horizontally. When I say vertically, meaning alignment at the top in terms of OKRs and how the complementary OKRs to make it real. For example, if driving sales growth was an OKR, key results saying we wanted to drive X percentage of growth. It's not just sales that has that key results, but it's also supporting functions like marketing or product and technology. How does that OKR complement and support the OKR? So the OKR framework was a key mechanism which took 18 months to get to that point of one, scaling enterprise-wide, basically, I said, vertical, with across each functions, how does that top, the OKR that's meant to bring the entire organization together, that everyone marches towards the same goal and has shared priorities and shared outcomes. And then how does that drill into the department or functional level OKRs? And then across when I say the horizontal alignment, an example would be when you think about concept marketing. Like, marketing in most organizations has friction with sales. Like, it's a silo, and you can argue there's also friction. Same thing like product and technology. How do you actually make sure that the OKRs are, written in a way, and how do you actually make sure there's alignment and the behaviors and actions and the work that gets done actually is complementary and is contributing to the overall OKRs? So in the example that I was talking about in sales marketing, it's not that marketing has a budget and you run a bunch of campaigns and you run leads, but how does that actually tie back to the marketing having a KR, for example, marketing assisted sales, which they have a skin in the game of contributing to the overall sales numbers. So it's not just creating and bunch of campaigns and executing them, but how does that actually contribute in terms of qualified leads? How does it actually translate into marketing assisted sales? So they actually contribute to the sales number. And from a product standpoint, whether it is a roadmap and achievement, product stability from a customer NPS score. So it's not just the customer success organization that owns the NPS, but product stability or sales and other organizations, when they interact with customers, what are the how do they contribute to the NPS scores? So the alignment and the breaking down of silos was actually done more from an OKR standpoint, from an outcome, focused on outcomes, going back to what I said, outcomes and impact, as I said earlier. But basically using this to drive what work actually is going to support achieving these outcomes, and through coaching of what behaviors and actions need to align with breaking down those silos and promoting that cross-functional behavior. I know this is not a simple 40-minute conversation, but I'm just going to spin through some of the other things. Leadership and team coaching, again, coaching not just at a team level, but again, it's easier to point the finger and say leaders don't get agile, and leaders don't necessarily know, but to take an empathy from a customer leader perspective, in making sure that they understand. Most leaders understand what agile is, but how do you actually contextualize for them and actually make sure that you're translating that into behaviors and mindsets that you would want them to self-transform, but actually help coach their teams to actually demonstrate those behaviors and actions and mindsets on the ground. So that was a key aspect of our agility enablement. The next one is more the easier one. I shouldn't say easier one. It's a more common and or more understood one in terms of the cross-functional team of teams. Earlier on, when I said for each of the segment and for each of the sub-segment, we had to tailor our team design or team of team design and how we actually approach across the end-to-end journey. So a snippet or glimpse of this is for one sub-segmentation, what a pod look like. And here's where it kind of doesn't have say for example in this one a technology one, but think about this more as a team of teams where you have a go-to-market team which has the typical go-to-market functions, and the conduit being product management, which again has that product management and technology organizations. How does that take from here to the product roadmap and the delivery of it and the operations of it? So this is just an illustration of how we build team of teams, contextualized for individual subsegments and across different customers. And this here is a snapshot of how we did leadership coaching. Again, getting leadership coaching just for having tangible measures in terms of 360 feedback, what are their peers telling about them in terms of the agile mindset and behaviors? What are their direct throughput saying, and what are their superiors saying? So those were all the key elements of enablers. And if you remember earlier on, I said it's not just agile that was behind the success. So to claim credit that agile did everything would be false. So that's an important thing from a change management standpoint. We didn't claim everything was because of agile, but there were complementary things in terms of where I touched upon digital assisted sales or digital service and renewal or HR and finance process. How do we actually change the underlying technology and AI and other things, enablement technical agility or digital agility, enablement, and other like core foundational enablement in terms of like your HR talent performance, like moving from a individual performance, like, in the above construct of a go-to-market, like how do you make this more a team-based performance goals, and like finance from a funding standpoint. Those were all like, in a nutshell. I'm trying to compress this in the interest of time, and we can go more in the Q&A. But those were all like in terms of some snippets of what we did from an agility enablement standpoint. Why wouldn't the leaders be involved in the COE? Could you have a leader COE? Yeah, the leader of the COE was actually under the CHRO organization, or Chief People Organization. So it was not a standalone, but the Chief People Officer was a sponsor. And that was just like, to make sure that more the impartial, like not to sit within product or technology or within the business, like, people, we can debate like which one is the right one, but the organization sat under the People Organization, and the sponsor for the COE was the Chief People Officer working with the C-level folks. I'm happy to answer more questions in the Q&A. Just gonna get to the proof points, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So a lot of the proof points in a nutshell, what I would say is the commercial outcomes, like, you can look up the annual reports, that speaks for itself, but like in terms of tangible, specific examples, the pipeline sales growth, like, were significantly improved in terms of the OKRs, and like outcomes that they achieved were more than what they had anticipated. The NPS score was broadly improved, like by percentage points compared to what they were before. Other aspects in terms of speed to market and other things, like, what we traditionally were like 6 to 12 plus months, we were able to get to an incremental and iterative delivery of like 6 to 12 weeks. And then like, subsequent fast follow, like 2-3 weeks releases. And just from a industry recognition standpoint, like last year, we had presented all the things in terms of how agility helped like the organization, not just from a place of responding to change, but also from a place of like, how do you actually disrupt the market? And we were recognized as a part of the World Agility Forum last year as the winner for the overall transformation initiative. In terms of agility, how agility helped the business from the outcomes perspective, but how it actually also helped from a different lens, not just responding to change, but like, how do we disrupt the market? Like, during a pandemic time, how did this actually help the organization to come up with new products that were actually help the customers, to in a pandemic time frame or a pandemic period in terms of like their financial perspective, or in terms of they're continuing their business as usual. So newer products and better service and support was thanks to agility for how the organization was quickly able to reconfigure and pivot to the needs of the COVID. So those were just a couple of proof points that I thought I'll share. Now, where does, like, at the end of the this thing I mentioned about COE. So at the end of 2020, the organization has built that internal muscle, and has disbanded the COE, and is now, the organization is in an always-on transformation mode. That's how they operate. So now they're already starting 2021, they're on their next change program in terms of what's going to take them from where they finished off in 2020, which was where I was, till end of 2020, and looking forward into their next change journey, which is going to take them from all the success that they've had between 2018 to 2020, and now looking forward to how they can actually build upon that and actually get to drive better customer outcomes, better commercial outcomes, and better employee outcomes. So that's kind of like the work done. I know there's a lot of learnings, and everyone's got like different learnings from this, but I just thought I'll call out a few quick things, both from being a consultant and being an exec leading this transformation internally. I put the slide just like, my learnings, and it looks like a Coca-Cola bottle thing, but in terms of like, the key learnings, that was like back in mid 2020. And then if I were to distill down on the left, like, empathize for your customers, whether you're an internal employee or a consultant. I think it's easier like to come and talk from, if you're a change agent and like an agile evangelist, like whatever you call yourself, it's easier to come and say like, it's simple and how to actually enable agility. But one, know that like most of these leaders or like teams have actually been successful as an organization even before Agile, whether they've adopted Agile or not, have been successful or probably been successful. I can't generalize that, but probably were successful. And as you kind of go through this journey, it's important to make sure, one, we acknowledge that like what they have been here because of the success that they've established, but they need like some help to actually see what is this new muscle that's needed to actually change that. So it's having that empathy. For me personally, that's a big learning, is even me not being showing up as a traditional consultant, telling to them, but rather sell it to them in terms of like what changes, what's different, what could they do differently in a more thing. Two is own the change journey. Again, this is an interesting perspective as I transition into a full-time, is it's easier like to look at like consultants, like whether you're independent or a company, to come and like tell and like look at them to own the change journey. But really the change journey, I think, Karen, to your question, is leaders owning this journey at all levels and actually supporting it. That was a key success. Like the example of the leader that I talked about, volunteering, self-selecting, jumping like all in, even without knowing what it means or knowing personally how to do it, but like just being wanting to own that change journey and being in front of it, learning with the rest of the organization and going through that change is a key ingredient, at least like from my experience. And the third one is, the part that I talked about, like frameworks and other things. We were very framework agnostic. In the product and technology, yes, there was a little bit more of the like Scrum/slave, Safe/Kanban elements of it. But once you moved away from the technology area, it was more around outcomes like OKRs. How do we get the cross-functional teams? Like we were less rigid about like stories for sales teams, because for anyone that's worked with marketing and sales or customer success, you probably would have realized like getting them to write a user story is, I would admit that I've not been successful in at least more than one place, but it was around more focused on outcomes, what you need to do on a quarterly basis, like how do you break that down into what you need to do from an outcomes, get to an outcomes perspective, week over week, or month over month, quarter over quarter. So being a little bit flexible about like frameworks, but more focused on outcomes and what is the right contextualization of framework and / methodology or practices is key. That's super important learning. Upskilling and capability building. Absolutely, I touched on this, like, for workplace of the future or workforce of the future, it's not likely that you're going to find the talent like within, and the answer is not always like hire like vendors or like hire external. It's a combination of internal upskilling, capability building, combination of like vendors, consultants, and like external hires, done in a more responsible way over a period of time. And the last one is like technology, digital enablement, data and analytics alongside like HR, other like foundational infrastructure aspects are critical for the success of a transformation journey. I see a couple of questions. I think I'm actually done with my time, or what I had for slideware. So with that, I can go through the questions that were there. So
Sure. So Sri, I do see a few questions out here. The first one is from Greg. Did you have a hybrid mix of traditional and agile, or no agile at all?
So I think, as I said, like in the last statement, product and technology have been adopting Agile for like 10, 15 years. So I think there's less hybrid there, or like less traditional. But in terms of outside of the product and technology, the examples that I stated, you could almost say that it was more agility, less about like Agile or like framework. So I guess maybe I would answer it in a different way, saying that it was more about agility rather than about agile, if that makes sense, Greg. I don't know if that answers your question. If you have a follow-up, I'd love to hear. But Anju, was that, do you want to move to the next question and give Greg a chance?
Sure. So Greg, please, if your answer is still not, if your question is still not answered, feel free to ask. We'll move on to the next question from Karen. What were the key actions taken to break down silos?
Yeah, no, so one example that I said earlier was like OKR was a framework, was a key anchor, like, align the organization and center of everything that we do. So basically all functions, as I shared earlier, the examples that I shared earlier were what we adopted in terms of getting that alignment. Now, there were a couple of things that I didn't necessarily share in terms of like org structure related changes that we had to do from breaking down the silos, like some things that were more traditionally, potentially cause friction. We actually made an intentional choice of, changing the org structure in a way that based on the silos and in getting more alignment. So it's not necessarily like resulting in like headcount reduction necessarily, but it's more about like changing the focus and intent of like leaders to make sure that it's a roll up of the certain functions and or specific things to more better align and break down like traditional silos. And, as an example, in some organizations have like UX sitting outside of product. Like, one of the things that we did is like UX coming under like sitting within product because part of the that like is one example that we could say. And marketing as another example is how do you move moving marketing under like the go-to-market functions rather than sitting separately. So that helped with some of the alignment. So those were like some I guess couple of like big things that actually help with break down some of the silos.
Thank you. So next question, again coming from Karen. Why wouldn't the leaders be involved in the COE? Could you have a leader COE to get them aligned and engaged? Example, with the government organization with many agencies that need to align.
So I'm not 100% sure I understand the second part of the question. So let me answer the first part of the question, and perhaps Karen, if you don't mind clarifying, I'm not sure I understand the second part. So the first part of the question, as I stated earlier, like this COE was like, sponsored by the Chief People Officer. Key thing is leadership, all of them need to buy in. So the one thing that was key to this change journey, and I'll just go back to the slide earlier where one of the key lessons learned was leaders lead the way, and it's basically aligning the organization. It was basically getting to do all the different like leaders, not just the CEO or the Chief People Officer, but like Chief Operating Officer or Chief Revenue Officer, Marketing Officer, everyone aligned on the change journey, and everyone aligned like in terms of like the COE as an enablement vehicle and the mandate to actually support the organization. So yes, the leaders were very involved, like even in terms of the work that the COE did, like so all the the inflection points and the change journey that I showed, these were not just like COE driving like where we're going. This was actually in support or working with the CE, the operating committee or the C-level folks to say, here's the outcome, here's where we think it needs, we need to go. And this was in working together with the CEO team. So it was a leader-led COE or sponsored COE, but then the important other addition I would say is that everyone on the C level was bought in to this change and was supportive of this change and like had a voice at the table in influencing the direction and how this journey went. If that answers the first part of your question.
Thank you, Sri.
Is there a clarification on the second part?
Hey, Karen, would you like to clarify the second part? So in the meanwhile, I'll move on to the next question. What were the key areas that organization felt extreme discomfort in transforming and brought important learning from agility perspective? This is coming from Niranjan.
No, great question, Niranjan. I think just maybe let me, couple of the ones that I can think of right away was like, the example that I just gave earlier about like breaking down silos, the example of people like, align, like, org structure related changes for gaining alignment. Like, it was one thing, like definitely people were not comfortable because remember, like I said about customer empathy and people, like most of these leaders have been with the organization 20 to 30 years and they've been successful and they've gotten to the position they are at today or were at because of all the amazing outcomes that they've achieved. Now, this like, with the organizational desire and need or want to move into this model, there was definitely discomfort because people were comfortable with their older ways of working because it worked. It helped them be successful in the past. So that was one thing around like the extreme discomfort was in people understood that concept, but actually translating that into behaviors, actions, and actually day-to-day, how they guide their teams on like, empowering and how they like let go of more outputs and like getting more outcome focused. Those were all like discomfort areas. And I think your subsequent question, like in other words, org was challenged and may not have achieved the target state or event. Yeah, it was not simple. Like not all leaders were bought in. Not all like these people were on, dealt well with the change journey. So obviously, like some people fared well, some people did not. So it's not to paint a rosy picture that it's all like happy rainbows and unicorns. There were definitely challenges, like that being one. The other one was around the example that I talked about, like the P&L structure and the goals and like alignment, like that introduced a lot of discomfort. Like for as an example that I gave earlier, like marketing to own, like have something in their KR, like saying that they're going to contribute to X million or billion, whatever, in sales. Otherwise, they're on the hook for delivering sales when they're not the ones actively selling, is a huge discomfort, like for a thing. And same thing for a customer success org, like where they're talking to customers and hearing about like product instability issues, and they're not the ones actually building the products. And it was a lot of the alignment and the behavior change that definitely was a discomfort, and it took a significant amount of time. It was not 1 month, it was not 2 months. Like I said, this was like from 2018 to 2020. It took a significant amount of time to either help people overcome these barriers, or if people were the barriers, like help them through coaching and or like other decisions that need to be made, without going into specifics. But I think those were things. I think the important learning was, again, some of the other aspects that I covered here, right? Like the letting go of what worked well was focusing on the impact. Like, for someone in a COE, if you're in a COE or like, the role that I was in, you're not like I said earlier, you can't claim to be the one to get to all the outcomes. You're an enablement function. So how do you actually, even for like my personal journey, it's an uncomfortable spot where you're not the ones, you can't claim all the credit. You're an enablement function. You're a cost center in a way, because you don't bring revenue, but you're helping other functions and like, get to better commercial or customer or people outcomes. So discomfort and the important learning is like, make it about outcome, how you're actually helping the organization. I think that was an important learning, is it's not about the COE made it all, that's another learning. So if folks on this call are in an enablement function within a COE or like other functions, it's just like kind of making sure that you don't claim victory for all. You're an enablement function, empathize with your customer, and focus on impact. Don't focus on vanity metrics. Don't focus on like, about like maturity. I mean, maturity, yes, you could argue it's important, but anchor on impacts. That's going to be your selling point for you as a COE. If you're in an enablement function, that's going to be important for your sponsoring leader. That's going to be important for whichever leader is going through as a champion or as a pilot in this example, for them to be the change champions across the rest of the organization. I would say not all in exhaustive, but those are the three that come to my mind. Hopefully that answers your question, Ranjan.
Yeah. So we are right on time. It's 8:01, but I still see 2 more questions. Would you like to address those, or would you like to email?
Oh, I'm here live. I think offline is not the best way. I guess we all experience. I'm happy to go as long as people are willing to go.
Okay. So Karen has asked, how did you deal with those who did not fare well with the org changes? What examples can you provide of an org change that was difficult to deal with, and why was it difficult? I think it's identical to what we were discussing.
Yeah, I think I just answered that question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it came before I answered the previous one.
It came after, like while you were answering that. That's why I was wondering. So Karen, I hope the conversation which we were having while answering to Niranjan's question did take care of this. Another I see from, so Karen is saying yes. Are you seeing a trend of firing all the Agile coaches and going back to management structures?
Great question. It's the one, you can't generalize that answer because different organizations do different things. But what I would say that is, I wouldn't say that it's firing. I think think about this more as the internal, like, again, if you go back to purpose and outcomes, like, the enablement function in this example was there to build that muscle, like internal capability and sustainability within the business. And our purpose was done like once we had that critical mass and critical momentum to go. Now, does coaching disappear? Need for coaching disappear? No. But does that coaching come, could that coaching come through alternate means? Now, when I said like disbanded, I guess the other part of the story, which is answer to your question, some of the folks from our COE have taken roles within the business. So not all 30 people are outside of the organization. That's an institutional loss of knowledge and things. So there are a lot of people who actually helped with this, have now disseminated and integrated in the part of the business, alongside all the other leaders at all levels that we've actually built this capability and sustainability. So to a long-winded way of answering your question, if that question came from Greg, it's not that the need for coaching disappears. The need for coaching is always going to be there, but the question is, how do you build that internal muscle capability and sustainability, and whether that needs to be through a permanent, persistent COE model of coaches, or is an alternate model building that coaching capability and sustainability within the business? When I say business, not just business functions, but I mean like broader, like whether it is product technology or different parts of the organization. So that's kind of how I would answer it. And like I said, there's no general answer. Some of my other clients have had COE for like 9 years. Some of them, like this one, like, they've moved away from having a central COE. So I would say it's a spectrum, and it's almost like answering the question of how do you build that internal coaching capability muscle, sustainability muscle, and whether it is formal agile coaches, or it's building that coaching muscle within the existing organization.
Thank you, Sri. So last question that I see here on the screen. Can you share agile coaching model starting off under constrained budgets? This title doesn't exist today, but need to be. Any recommendations?
Again, the second part of the question where it says this title doesn't exist today, but needs to be any recommendations. I'm not 100% sure I understand. So Lavita, hopefully you can clarify what you mean by that while I try to answer the first part of the question. Yes, right. I think like, if you were to think about the levers, like, even in this example where I talked about, we started with a pilot, like, and we had like a small, slim COE of 3 people to start with. So I guess if your budget is constrained, rather than answering from the question of budget, I would maybe pivot the conversation to the levers that you have or you want to pull as an organization to drive the change. And so what I mean by that is, one, like, how fast or how much time or how much period of time would you want to go through this change journey? So that's one lever. 2, do you want to do a big bang or a more phased or scaled approach to this change? 3, do you already have like internal coaching muscle that exists within the organization? Even if it's not through formal like Agile coaches, like do you have people with like similar experience that you can either reskill, upskill, and potentially use? The last one is, I guess that lever is like, how much are you willing to spend, which will probably drive your budget and other things. So I think the answer is, yes, you can start this Agile coaching model or like, this journey with, with a smaller team, depending on a constrained budget. But, then one of the things that I would suggest or advise, like invite you to think about is like, how do you have the conversation in terms of level setting, like what the transformation roadmap is going to look like, and what are the outcomes that you're going to achieve, and how much are you going to achieve over a period of time, because you're constrained on enabling agility to drive that better, like, the outcomes differently. So maybe that's one consideration that I would suggest is like, look at those levers, is how do you orchestrate, like what's more important? Is timing more important than a scale or others? Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you for the kind words.
I see a great comment from Greg. I'll read it for everyone. This is one of the best sessions I have been to. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sri, for a great session. We all echo the sentiments.